For our next session, we have Peter Fiekowsky. He is a man on a mission to restore a safe climate to give to his grandchildren as an inheritance. I hope during this next session, you'll come to understand his drive and motivation, as well as I have come to over the years. All right. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. And let me just thank Mindahi for coming. I've known Mindahi for about 3 years. And my relationship with him and the whole indigenous community allows me to wake up in the morning with this kind of grace, remembering why we're doing this. Because trust me, as a physicist and an entrepreneur, that's not normally what I wake up to. So Mindahi, thank you for being here, and thank you for being in this world with us, and thank you for your leadership.
Alrighty, so I'm going to be doing a light interview with Peter. I'm going to try to trip him up with some questions. I hope the audience is ready for that. So I'll start off with a softball for you, Peter. How did you end up in climate work at all?
Well, I created many years ago, 25 years ago, a mission for myself to leave a world that we're proud of to our children. And I thought that was easy enough. And I was working on poverty work, and things went well. We were making a lot of progress, reducing child mortality and reducing the number of people living on less than $1 a day. And by 2010, the progress was flattening out, and I realized that no one was working to restore the climate, and I didn't know why. And it took me years after that to figure out why.
So can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Why, in your opinion, was nobody working on it at this point?
Well, I've really just realized it in the last month that I was in a fantasy that the country would take it on. When I was 20 years old at MIT, devastated to hear that the global warming is happening. As a physicist, it didn't surprise me one iota. But when they pointed out in this article in 1975 that the planet would become intolerably hot in my lifetime, well, it was obvious in 1975 after the moon landing and after getting out of Vietnam and after this amazing things, that the EPA was established and we were cleaning the air already. That, well, this would obviously be taken care of. And after 50 years, that was a fantasy. It's not in the job description of our government. And why we're convened here is that really it's a problem that belongs to the people who have a stake. People like us who have children and nephews and nieces and grandchildren, because we have a stake, as Mindahi said, in this. The government has other problems. Corporations have shareholders and other problems. This is our problem. And so we're here to establish the roadmap to get there. And this is the first time to my knowledge, that anyone has said it's up to us to write the roadmap and not wait for them. Because imagine me being a 19-year-old and saying, oh, we have a problem here. Clearly was not my problem as a 19-year-old. And I carried that really until the last few years. It's our problem now. We're the adults.
So I've got to ask, you said, do we get there? Where is there?
One of the first things that I realized was asking, why are we doing this? Because as a scientist, I was fascinated by the science. By what causes the warming, how do you cool it, where does carbon, the carbon sinks, the carbon cycles, and all of those scientific questions. And I was studying it, and I realized that had no impact on my children. And I realized, oh, the reason we're doing this is for our children. And it was actually a bishop at one of the climate conferences had a dinner, a fancy dinner with lots of wine. I think it was the wine that got me to realize that, oh, it's about our children. It's not about the science. And then it was very clear what our children want. They want to get the same climate that we were given, because that's the climate that allowed us to get agriculture and civilization.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good point in terms of what we're doing for our children. I'm also a father. I have one kid. I have two nieces I have custody of. It's a long story, but that is why we're all here. You did mention, however, the science specifically. And I think we're all of the opinion that more science does need to be done, however science is done. And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, that's a great question, because I'm glad that we have folks from Woods Hole and from USC to join us. That as a scientist, of course, science is very important, and understanding allows us to open up our imagination. The thing going to the moon was probably not a possibility 1,000 years ago, but science allowed us to imagine that. As a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, I also know that most of the things that we do that make a difference are not understood by science until long after the thing was done. So, a lot of the inventions that took us to the moon, engineers tested this, tested that, just like Edison tested, 3,000 materials to make a light bulb. Mm-hmm. And then a few decades later, the scientists said, "Oh, we can explain that for you now." And so it's a dance, but it's a dance that happens in parallel.
All right, and parallel is really important here because I think the way I was recruited anyway was that this is a multidisciplinary endeavor. There's a lot of voices here, and you organized all of them to get here and speak about what their areas of expertise. How does that make you feel that there's more than you? Because I think you started, you thought it was just you. How does it feel?
Oh, it's everyone. Thank you so much for being here. People. There are a few people I have only met today, but mostly it's people who have been very interested in restoring the climate, coming from Chuck with Rotary, and Carol, my co-author, doing writing, and so on and so on. It's a pivotal moment because we actually have a room full of people, very diverse. We did something similar to this in 2018 in Rome. The Cardinal Turkson recommended that we have a climate restoration conference in 2017, and we did it in 2018. And we had a lot of scientists. Okay. And not too much happened out of that other than we realized there's interest. Now we've got the whole gamut.
Okay. So we know that there's interest, and I believe we have a question from the audience.
Yes, we have a question from the audience. Could you please define climate restoration for those of us who haven't spent 6 years with you?
So we were asked to define climate restoration
Yes.
for everyone who hasn't been with Peter since 2018.
Or written books with me. Climate restoration is simply defined as giving our children the same safe climate that we were given that allowed us to develop agriculture and civilization. And technically, it means getting CO2 to 300 parts per million, which is the highest level that humans have actually survived long term. So we know that we can survive that. Anything above 300 parts per million, there's theory, but it's speculation. And we don't speculate on the survival of our kids. So 300 parts per million by 2050. Almost everyone I speak to says, I think our planet, our climate, our ecosystems will be okay through 2050. When I started, I said 2070 or 2080, and everyone's faces fell. I said, we're not, just their faces said, we're not going to make that. So that's 300 by 2050 is our goal.
Okay, 300 by 2050, that's 25 years away. And I guess the real question is, goals are great. I had a goal last year of losing 50 pounds. And there was a lot of talk. There was a lot of science. So the question I got to ask you is, can we do it?
Well, can you lose 50 pounds?
That's a terrible question, Mr. Fiekowsky.
Of course you can, right? If you were, I watch movie actors, and they gain and lose weight like crazy, because they have to. Like, failure is not an option. And of course you could lose 50 pounds if it was that important. And so, of course, we can restore the climate. Nature has done it before ice ages 12 times in the last million years. In 1992, nature removed 20 gigatons of CO2 in 1 year, which is unthinkable, but it's right there in the CO2 record. And it's been done, so we can do it again.
All right, so I hear you've described a way, and similar with me, I know the way to lose 50 pounds. It's to
Yeah.
not like gummy bears, but I don't have the will, it turns out. How are you generating the will to restore the climate?
Well, convening a lot of fantastic people in a room, inviting them to share in their communities quickly that what we're doing is restoring a safe climate. We should have had the blip slide, but we don't have it available. If you think about all the reports you read about the climate, you see this exponential, the hockey stick. And that's how we that's how we have thought about climate. And that's changing today. Today, we're thinking about the climate as a blip, which started with a hockey stick, but comes back down to sustainability. And if you remember from your high school biology, all populations go through that. Something changes in the environment, the population skyrockets, and it comes back down again. It always goes that way. And our job is to have it be that when it comes down, we're the ones on stage. Now, if we neglect that, then it'll be cockroaches who are on the stage, but it will come back down. So we want the blip to be humanity flourishing.
So I think that's an important distinction. There are a lot of, and we are at EarthX, and there are a lot of people who are concerned very much with the Earth. And I'm also concerned very much with the Earth. However, one of the reasons I came onto this is because I'm concerned with the Earth for me as a human being. And as much as I'd love to live forever, I have been informed reliably that I will die. And my son will, hopefully take over whatever I have to leave him. But there is a human element to climate restoration where we are a natural part of the cycle, and we can perhaps enhance the natural cycle so that we can live a little bit longer than the dinosaurs. They're going to need a comet to take us out. But Peter, if there's anything else you want to say, now's the time before we kick this thing off.
Yeah. Well, yes. So I was thinking about this morning, that the future to some degree is unknown, and to some degree is very certain. As Marcus said, we're not, in a billion or 2 years, the planet's not going to be anything like it is. It may not be here at all. We know that from the physics of the sun and so on. So we know that's going to happen. We're going to be, humanity's off the stage at some point. And we know that we're going to be off the stage. I'm 70, so in 2, 3, 4 decades, I'll be off the stage. In the meantime, we get to play. And so we can panic about it, or we can look at the blip and say, we're going to ride that blip and we're going to have a good time bringing the planet back and maintaining as many species and as many ecosystems and as many relationships as we can. And we can get a lot done together and in respect and in joy.
Well, I've got to know. That sounded really nice, but is there an ideological bent to this? Is this a Democrat issue, Republican issue, socialism? What's your game?
That's sort of a mystery for me at this point. I love mysteries. I love diving into the unknown. And I would say that, no, it's not partisan. But, fried eggs aren't partisan, and they're not very exciting. They don't get people excited. And so, I've been sharing about climate restoration for a decade and a half, and no one has ever disagreed with my assertion that we all want to give our children a safe climate. And so there isn't much opposition. On the other hand, if you think about the news you may have read in the last day or week, climate's always framed as an oppositional thing. Those people, the oil companies, the Democrats, the Republicans, the Saudis, the Russians, it's always framed as an opposition. And the best I can come up with is we're fighting a war against the past, because our cultures and even our DNA evolved in a stable planet. where changes happened over tens of thousands of years, and we could just ride the wave. Now things are changing in years and decades, and we need to manage it. It's a whole new chapter, and so it's what we're going to achieve. The blip is a victory over the past, where rather than just riding the wave, we're actually guiding the wave so that we can stay on the scene and maintain not just a beautiful ecosystem, because if you've ever had a garden, the ecosystems actually do better when we're gone. But Mendahi won't lead us in these I'll call it prayers, because there's a better word, but Mendahi can't lead us in these prayers if we're gone. And there's something phenomenal about that we all want to keep happening.
Well, that was beautiful, Peter. I have one more question, I think, and we'll see if it leads us anywhere. But why aren't you doing this right now? I mean, this is a fantastic seminar, but why aren't we in the ocean?
Oh, excellent question. And I'm not ready for it. Give me a second here.
I said I'd get him.
Why aren't we in the ocean? There's a lot of reasons. General Petraeus yesterday at lunch gave us a great talk, and he started out saying that there are a lot of things possible, but what makes things successful is getting the big idea right. And when we established climate, it was ill-defined in the 70s. But most of you probably know Exxon and the oil companies, they were working hard on how do we stop global warming, because they're global citizens and they wanted to stay in business and needed to have customers. And if the civilization collapsed, they wouldn't have customers. And that was going fine until the 80s. And the political divide in the U.S. led to it becoming a political issue. And it was set in cement. In 1980, we couldn't see global warming. It was a theory. Now, as a physicist, it was a theory that I rolled my eyes at. Well, of course there's global warming. I can show you in a lab that it happens. But for people who weren't physicists, there was endless debate. Is it really happening? Is it global warming? Is it global cooling? And we've been stuck in that 1980s framework. That was 45 years ago. And that's the main reason. And so a lot of the science research going on right now is changing in the last 4 or 5 years. But most of a large fraction of the scientific research is still going on to prove that global warming is real, to answer the political question, which was answered 130, 140 years ago. Because it's not a science question, it's a political question. And the opportunity, especially here at EarthX, is to really frame it as a totally nonpartisan issue that we all want to be in. And we don't have any good models for that yet. So not only do we get to go into the ocean and replicate how nature does it, now that there are other possible ways to restore CO2, but they're thousands of times more expensive, so highly unlikely they'll happen at the scale needed. Nature's done it and never charged us a dime to do it, but to do it quickly will take some amount of money. But the reason we're not in the water right now is we're right now framing the game, making the plan. That plan that I thought they would develop 50 years ago when I was an undergraduate with a lot of hair and a big beard at MIT. But now we realize that it's up. I thought it was up to the government to do it, and now we're realizing it's up to us, and especially the wealthy families, the family offices who have the resources to do it, and the grandkids that will justify anything for us to succeed.
All right. I think that's our time, Peter, and thank you very much. Peter Fiekowsky will be presenting after lunch a talk on safety and governance in climate restoration, because obviously we're planning, but if you don't plan safely, you plan to fail. Okay.
Thank you.
You see, Bill?
Is that?